Good morning. I think we're going to start. I would like to welcome you all to this side event that is co-organized by the OECD Development Center and with UN Women and with the kind support of the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Development. It is a great pleasure for me to be speaking today at the UN Commission on Status of Women on behalf of the OECD Development Center and to make some opening remarks at this really exciting side event with a wonderful panel of speakers that I will introduce to you very shortly. As we commemorate the 20th anniversary of the Beijing Platform for Action, the mixed or slow results in some of the areas showcases important questions on the remaining barriers and difficulties to fully achieve the vision of gender equality embodied in 1995. So in this event, we will focus on two of the 12 critical areas of concern: women in power and decision-making and women and the media, predominantly. And I'm going to give a quick overview with some figures where we stand on progress made in terms of women in politics and more largely decision-making. Can you hear me? Right. All right. So in terms of women in power and decision-making, the Beijing Platform for Action made two essential commitments to change. It first called for measures ensuring women's equal access to and full participation in power structures and decision-making. And it also urged steps to increase women's ability to participate, such as training on leadership, public speaking, and political campaigning. And where do we stand today? We have made some progress. We have more female heads of states and we have more female heads of government. The percentage of women in parliament nearly doubled in the last 20 years. But still, this only translates into 22% of women in parliament today. Women's representation and participation in decision-making is a fundamental human right. Their involvement in politics is essential to ensure fair, inclusive decision-making processes and democratic governance. They are the best place to make the decisions and contribute to the decisions that affect them at all levels, whether in the family, the community, or at national level. But still, women have far to go in terms of equal representation in positions of power and decision-making structures and leadership, and their voice is not heard at all these levels. So on the media front, we also have mixed progress. And here again, Beijing Platform for Action made two commitments to change. It called for an increase in the participation and access of women to expression and decision-making in and through the media and new technologies of the communication. And it urged steps to promote a balanced and non-stereotypal portrayal of women in the media. Today, a woman is still 21% less likely than a man to own a mobile phone. Women's presence as news subjects in print, radio and television has only increased to 24% in 2010 from 17% in 1995. And 46% of stories still reinforce gender stereotypes, while only 6% challenge them. The media has a huge impact on shaping gender roles and expectations. It's therefore essential that we increase the proportion of women leaders in this sector. At the same time, and this is why we're here to talk about today, new media, such as social media, brings new opportunities to increase women's voice and the visibility of women's issues at all levels. And this can help accelerate progress towards equal participation by challenging established stereotypes. And in this event, we want to explore ways forward to increase women's involvement in decision-making through social media. How can we make women's voices count? This has happened already. We have seen how women seized the power of social media during the Arab Spring events. We have seen how the He for She movement galvanized attention on gender equality to both women and men. And how hashtag activism, which we'll explain soon what this means, is regularly used to raise awareness, increase visibility, and mobilize both at grassroots and higher levels. But does it really lead to change? There are some challenges, such as women's limited access to the technology or the limited training opportunities, the need for a stronger women's movement linking with on-the-ground efforts, among others, and we'll discuss some of these today. But we have to acknowledge that women's voices are more visible than ever today thanks to social media. There is a proliferation of blogs and online collaborative platforms that have arisen as another way to organize for gender activists, and this was not there in 1995. And I would like to end this opening remarks by introducing Wikigender as one of these platforms, and you have some flyers around in the room to find out about it. At the OECD Development Center, we have launched Wikigender 7 years ago. At the time, it was unthinkable for the OECD to have an online platform that is open for contributions from anyone on gender equality and women's rights issues. Today, we have on average 40,000 unique monthly visitors, around 3,000 editors, and close to 2,000 articles. the platform has established itself as a major hub for gender equality. And I would like to thank here the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Norway, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland, and the Austrian Development Agency for supporting us in this effort. Since 2010, we organize online discussions, and we try and reach new audiences on a wide range of issues. We have discussed climate change, violence against women, adolescent girls, unpaid care work, data gaps on gender equality, and much more. After each of these, we bring out the main points and present them at various events, such as this one. And these online discussions, in my opinion, are a great way to engage beyond traditional OECD circles. They are a unique opportunity to include voices that are often marginalized and do not have the possibility to attend such meetings. In line with today's event, we had an online discussion a month ago on effective strategies to advance women's rights through social media, with over 80 comments. If you're interested, we also produced a short paper that is also available for you in the room. However, Wikigender as a platform is not perfect. We want to be able to reach out more, and one issue is the language, as not everyone participates in English. So we have also opened our discussions in Spanish and French. And this year, we will be working towards the launch of a French version of Wikigender, together with Genre en Action, which is a large international francophone network acting for the promotion of gender equality in development. And also thanks to the support of the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Development, the Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie, and the French Development Agency. We are also currently redesigning the look of the platform, and the French one will reflect those changes. All this work, and Wikigender is just one example, contributes to the advocacy work that we are all doing here at CSW and beyond. So thank you again for your interest and for being here today to discuss how we can make women's voices heard from Beijing to Post-2015 in social media. I would like to especially thank to my colleagues from UN Women, Anna Folth and Diana Russo, with whom we collaborated for this event. And I'm just going to end here and mention that the event is also live webcast. We have a hashtag, it's Women Speak, so feel free to tweet away. This is really a social media event, so we'll also be taking some questions from the audience to the speakers via Twitter. And now we'll have 5 short presentations, followed by an interactive discussion, and my colleague Anna Folth will provide some concluding remarks. Thank you. I'm going to start with Anna, who is manager of the UN Women's empowerwomen.org. She initiated consultations for this global online platform in February 2013 and brought it to its global launch during the high-level segment of the UN General Assembly in the same year. And I would like to ask Anna, could you tell us how, through empowerwomen.org, you are promoting online and social media engagement? Thank you.
Thank you so much. So let me just start very briefly. Who are we, Empower Women? We started off, if you were here 2 years ago, you probably heard of the Knowledge Gateway for Women's Economic Empowerment. So we started off as an online platform, but we realized that it became more than that. It was not just online. It was matching offline activities with online activities. So we have emerged, and we are just rebranding our platform, and we're calling ourselves now a movement for women's economic empowerment, which we couldn't do 2 years ago because we didn't exist and we were not there. We didn't have any members, we didn't have any content. And what I will talk about today is a little bit how we do to bring women's voices online and how those online voices aspire action offline again. So it's really, we have a lot of exciting members that are driving the women's economic empowerment agenda. And before I continue, I would also like to thank the Government of Canada, who are fully financing us and has made this work possible. So just to recap a little bit on the Beijing Platform for Action, I'm not going to read the 2 strategic objectives, but while our core mandate is about women's economic empowerment, it also goes in very strongly into women in the media. And the 2 strategic objectives that were set in 1995 that really brings women's voices online and also showcase a non-stereotypical portrayal of women online. So how do we do this? We have currently about 5,000 members, both women and men, from all over the world, from more than 190 countries. We have, during the course of 1 year, accumulated 133 champions. So these are the champions of women's economic empowerment on our platform. And they are working both online in championing the cause, but also offline, and I will tell you a little bit more about that. We have about 24 partners. We're bringing in the UN system, not only UN Women, but the whole UN system, and our partners in countries and in the regions. And we use different channels. We use the platform itself, empowerwomen.org. We use social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We use radio, and I will show a little bit about that. And then we do advocacy offline that we then showcase online. So this is, I'm not going to go into in detail about all these activities, but just to show the variety of things that we do. We have news updates, we have discussions, both led by expert and our members themselves. When they feel like something bothers them or they want to address something, they go online and they discuss a particular issue. And also, since there is a number of people from Kenya here, I just wanted to showcase one example that we do in terms of policy recommendations, where UN Women was requested by the government of Iraq to help them formulate a gender-responsive procurement law. And our office in Iraq said, we are not experts on this, can you help? So we circulated this request for support all over, and Kenya was featured as one of the good practices in procurement, dedicating a quota for 30%. So just to give you an example of the kinds of things that we do online. We also feature our members' discussions, our members' stories, what they bring to the platform. We show it also on social media. So daily, we are showcasing on both Facebook and Twitter what is happening on the platform. So people can follow us on the platform, but also on social media. And we are tweeting out what's happening and what are the story of the day. I will go in a little bit more in detail. Since we are focusing on women's economic empowerment, we have a dedicated platform that we call iLearn. It is really featuring women entrepreneurs, what they do and how the motivation, drive, and skills that they have to set up the business and overcome challenges in their communities to be a successful businesswoman. So it addresses a number of issues and in her story, but we're also bringing some questions to the reader and some lessons drawn from business perspective. And we are doing this with internet.org, and we are rolling it out in a number of countries, currently in Hindi, Swahili, Spanish, French, and English. And we are considering other languages as we have the capacity to roll it out. But this is really a way for us to reach out to women who don't have a regular computer or internet access, but have it on their regular feature phone. So this is a way that we have managed to reach out to these women with some concrete recommendations for women in business. Our campaign, this is a social media-driven campaign for women's economic empowerment and women's empowerment more broadly. We have support from a number of partners, but it's really about putting a picture of a situation that you're facing or a challenge that you're facing or something about women's economic empowerment or somebody that inspired you or somebody that has made a difference for women's economic empowerment. People are sending in the pictures with a short little paragraph and they're describing their view and experience of women's economic empowerment. And this is very exciting because we are getting a lot of a younger audience that contribute their photos and stories from all over the world. And we see here the second picture is from Vanuatu, and we are thinking about these women today as they had described prior to the catastrophe happening there, their situation over there, and we hope that that can remain even today. We are using a blog for women to also show their stories, and we have a variety from both developed and developing countries, women describing their businesses, describing their situation. We have one woman from Cambodia describing how the internet empowered her, and now she's a well-recognized blogger in Cambodia. We are using radio, and the World Radio Day, some of our members went out on radio, and they talked about not only about Empower Women platform, but also about the issue. And we had it from members in Philippines. This is only what we know because they reported back to us. From the Philippines, us here in the US, we went to the UN Radio Day, Nepal and Bahamas, where they were talking about the issue and another way of reaching out to women with the messages that we have collected from other women sorry, online. Just to show you also that we have some offline activities. So, for example, we took our I Am Woman campaign to Cairo. So there was, for the International Women's Day last Friday, a celebration of the day and also an activism for women's economic empowerment. We bring these images from Cairo online, and we are tweeting it out and putting it also on Facebook to make sure that everybody knows that there are a lot of thousands of people in Cairo that are on board on driving this agenda. Similarly, we participated in the Global Mobile Learning Week in Paris, and you see the frame here. We also have it here behind us, and we welcome all of you. If you want to take part of the I Am Woman campaign, once we finish this meeting, outside we'll be with the camera and the frame, and you're welcome to participate, and we'll post it on Twitter and other social media channels. Very briefly on our champions that I mentioned earlier. These are champions that are taking not only the online activism to their heart, but really do things offline and bring it to us and tell us what they've done. So we have one in Italy. She's a teacher. She did a variety of activities with her students and in the educational area where she works in Italy. And she came up with I Draw to Empower Women contest. So the children were writing about and drawing about what they see is needed for women's economic empowerment and how they see it from their perspective. We also had a woman in Nepal who was organizing rural women in the name of being a champion for women's economic empowerment. And she has done an amazing things, and these stories are featured on empowerwomen.org. So just finally, we have heard from our members, in many of them, we helped them establish social media accounts. Prior to becoming member of our community, they didn't have an online account or social media account, and we helped them to establish that. And what we heard from our members is, before I joined you, I didn't know I had a voice. And that's quite strong to enable women to speak up and talk about the issues. And we on Empower Women do it in many different ways. And we just want to celebrate everybody's voice. And through the I Am Woman campaign, we have one story per day that we're celebrating, and everybody's tweeting about it to showcase that everybody's voice counts. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna. I think this was a really interesting presentation, showing the different examples of how Empower Women can engage both online but also offline. I think radio is also really important to reach out to the most marginalized communities, and certainly, like the examples you provided are really, really good. I'm going to now move to Liz Ford, who is the Deputy Editor of Global Development website at The Guardian, and where she leads on women's rights and gender equality issues. And Liz, I would like to ask you, as we talk about social media, but you represent a media organization, how a large media organization such as The Guardian reaches out to such a broad audience to support and engage women's organizations and bring their voices to the fore? Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Estelle. It's great to be part of the panel. And to answer the question, I think I need to give a bit of Guardian context. So probably, I mean, The Guardian's been around as a news organisation for, well, centuries. It's been around forever. And probably about 10 years ago, The Guardian really started looking at how it can better tell stories and engage readers, and we moved to a different platform that allowed us to do more with video, do more with audio. We finally embraced blogging, and we opened up practically everything to comments to really try and get some kind of dialogue, to crowdsource ideas, and that kind of stuff. And so in 2007, we kind of brought all that together in a project that we were involved in called the Catine Project. And that was basically using all these platforms, setting up a website at The Guardian to monitor how lives were changing in this rural community in northeast Uganda who were the recipients of an NGO development project. And that was initially a 3-year project. So we engaged local journalists, and we wanted to get residents involved in blogging and videoing about their lives, and we wanted to attract a global audience to this so that we could get sort of residents and readers discussing things and debating issues and crowdsourcing ideas and all that sort of thing. So the project had varying degrees of success, but that's for another time and another debate. But the key thing for us is that it highlighted the importance of hearing from people who we are, discussing. So actually people who are living the experience. And there was a real appetite from readers to engage in this. There was something that was very powerful that came from hearing directly from somebody through the comment threads, through online chats, and that really touched our audience. So fast forward a few years, and in 2010, The Guardian launched the Global Development website with the ethos of trying to really engage with local journalists around the world and to hear from local people. And in 2014, we launched a page specifically on women's rights and gender equality with the support of the feminist funding organisation Mama Cash, the Ford Foundation, and the Association for Women's Rights in Development. So we'd obviously written about gender equality and women's rights before on the Global Development site, but when the suggestion was made to do something more about women, I'd kind of jumped at it. I'd just come back from the Rio +20 summit. I don't know if anyone else was there, and I'd had a bit of a, it was a road to Damascus moment or scales falling from my eyes, but something, because I actually saw firsthand the real blatant attempt to undermine women's rights. And I'd never seen it in quite such a stark way. So I was shocked, and I was determined that any new section wouldn't just be about gender equality, it would have women's rights in the title, and it would be a place that celebrated victories, but very much exposed the backlash and the discrimination and the fight. But at its heart, we wanted, and we still want, the site to help build an online community where issues can be discussed, and crucially where women had a platform to talk in a mainstream media situation. And we're very fortunate that The Guardian does have global reach, and the issues of social justice is of general interest to our sort of core readers. It's always been part of what The Guardian's about, one of our values. But I think working with Mama Cash and with AWID meant that we weren't just tapping into our contacts from an office in London. We had access to contacts in women's rights organisations around the globe, which is fantastic. And I think both these organisations have perhaps given us a bit more legitimacy and have kind of, we're not just cold callers when we get in touch with an organisation. They've kind of can open the doors to us and can kind of help convince that a woman who's doing her work why she should maybe give up 10 minutes to try and write something for us or to listen to us asking her questions on the phone. So that has been a fantastic opportunity for us. So how have we actually engaged women? Well, we've attempted to do this in a number of ways. Through, obviously, storytelling. We're a news organisation, so we write stories and features. Through blogs and opinion pieces on a range of subjects, from rape in conflict to FGM to women in parliament. We've covered the gamut of things there. We've also produced what we call face walls, which basically we ask activists around the world a few questions, they answer them, and we put them in their photos up in kind of a big sort of block. You click on the page, you get all these photos of people, and then you click on the photo and up come their comments. And they work really nicely, they're quite eye-catching, and our editors elsewhere in the building like them, so that's always good. So they work quite well. So we've done one on sort of getting people's opinions on sexual violence and conflict around the London summit last year. We've also looked at opinions on progress since the Cairo Agreement last year. We've also launched videos. Recently, we've sort of had one on following a young woman who was looking to get an abortion in Mexico. We've done videos on fistula, and we've got a number of other things in the pipeline. We've also produced interactives on the state of women's rights and the state of abortion rights around the world, which have done very well and I think are quite a good resource for people. We've also attempted to crowdsource rape laws, which has had some success, but it's clearly not an easy ask, and it's something that we really want to build on, this kind of whole idea of crowdsourcing projects. And we've conducted online Q&As, Twitter chats, call-outs, witness assignments, asking people to share their stories and their pictures and videos. And we're also able to come to conferences like the Commission on the Status of Women in New York, where we get to meet people and talk to people and find out what's going on, which is brilliant. But obviously, we have challenges, definitely have challenges. It's tricky to engage some of the most marginalised people. As we learned from the Catine project, why should somebody give up their time to come and talk to us or to write something for us? What's in it for them, basically? So we've still got to work on getting those messages out and to convince people or help them to understand why it might be quite good. Language is also another issue. We only publish in English, and we'd desperately like to change that, but that's sort of a decision that's way above my pay grade, as they say. And we're a news organisation, so we have to find interesting ways of discussing some of the topics. So what could be key here might not attract my editor at all, or one of the foreign international editors at all. So, women in agriculture, much less easy to sell than sexual violence or child marriage. That's just the way it is, unfortunately. And then one of the big challenges we have is dealing with the backlash. It's dealing with the online trolls and the people who just don't like women's rights issues being discussed. So I don't know if anyone who's looked at the Guardian comment threads or has added a comment will probably know what I'm talking about. It's not always a friendly space. And the Guardian has a team of moderators who will look at comment threads, remove comments that are offensive or off topic. But we do have quite a high threshold of pain, and it can be very off-putting. We had a very high-profile woman who's been involved with politics for years, and she wrote us a piece, and she was horrified with the abuse that she got in the comment thread. And this is a season, she's used to being attacked, but she was absolutely shocked by that kind of level of vitriol that kind of tends to come out. We have a community coordinator on our team, and she keeps an eye on the comment thread. So we are doing more to try and kind of get rid of these sort of these kind of comments. And there was, as we went through a period of anyone. When we published a piece, if somebody went in and said, "What about the men?" we kind of removed that as being off topic. But that's kind of precisely why I want to see more women engaged. I'd love to have more women engaged in the site, so that when that nasty comment comes in, a number of other commentators will immediately sort of step in to challenge that commentator, redirect the debate, talk about their own experience, and basically politely try and beat the bullies. And finally, I am thrilled and I'm proud that The Guardian has a dedicated space to address women's rights. But it's not perfect, we're well aware of that, and it's very much a work in progress. And we do welcome your thoughts and your ideas. Our desire is to highlight and amplify voices in the debate and to expose the discrimination at local, national, international level, and to do what journalists do, which is kind of holding leaders to account too. And I think we've all got a part to play in that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Liz. I think this was a really great presentation showing how The Guardian engages with a global audience and online community on sensitive issues sometimes, FGM, fistula, but also how partnerships are important. I mean, Mama Cash and AWID are great organizations, and engaging with these sort of partners helps to reach out to more people and the right audience as well. But also you showcase some of the challenges, and I think we have to bear that in mind, that social media is kind of a double-edged sword in a way, because we also can use for advocating for gender equality, but there's also risks that social media is used to create backlash, and I think we have to keep that in mind. So I'm just going to move that really quickly to our third speaker now, Molly Vander, who is a product manager at Twitter, and she focuses on account security, account recovery, account management, and user privacy. She's also particularly passionate about the unique challenges in balancing security, privacy, and usability at scale. And she's also a member of the Women in Engineering group, which is an employee resource group that works towards improving diversity at Twitter and in the tech industry as a whole, which I think is also really important. So I'm going to ask Molly to tell us a little bit about the actual tool, social media. We have a wide array of tools. Twitter is one of them. And how is Twitter used to advocate for gender equality? Thank you.
Thank you for having me. How many people in here use Twitter? How many people know what Twitter is? How many people are tweeting right now? All right. Well, that is great to see. For those of you that don't know what Twitter is or may not be as, can you hear me? Awesome.
Je vois là cette activité soutenue par l'Agence française de développement, par la francophonie et le ministère des Affaires étrangères. J'ai cru que c'était pour donner une opportunité aux francophones de comprendre ce que vous allez dire. Depuis on est assis là, on n'entend rien. Pourtant, ce que vous dites, ça nous intéresse. Nous ne sommes pas dans une société unijambiste. Ça ne va pas. Pourquoi?
Oui, en
On
fait,
veut comprendre ce que vous dites, ça nous intéresse aussi.
nous allons avoir un résumé de cette réunion ensuite en français. Nous aurons l'opportunité d'avoir
Vous dites
les tweets.
quoi?
Nous aurons aussi un résumé de cette réunion en français. Nous aurons l'opportunité de partager avec vous les discussions aujourd'hui,
À quel moment?
après la réunion.
I wish I'd taken French in high school instead of Spanish. So for those of you that aren't as familiar with Twitter, Twitter is a public real-time platform for expressing ideas, thoughts, and events in units called tweets. A tweet can either be 140 characters of text, it can include video or pictures, and it's basically the proverbial water cooler on a global scale. So it's a place for people to come together and have discussions, conversations, share their experiences, share their stories, as Anna said. Twitter drives conversations around issues like gender equality and women's rights. So how many of you watched the Oscars this year? So for example, when Patricia Arquette got up and gave her speech at the Oscars about equal pay, there were about 320,000 tweets with the hashtag equal pay in the first 2 hours after her speech, which is a pretty incredible thing if you think about Twitter as this kind of global public water cooler that all of a sudden from this one moment, everybody was talking about equal pay. Similarly, if you watched the Super Bowl this year, when Always ran their Like a Girl commercials, they got 455,000 mentions during that time. So if you think about all of the people that were seeing and experiencing those Like a Girl commercials, and all of a sudden thinking about what does it really mean when we say that somebody does something like a girl. I definitely think that, partially due to social media and partially due to some of the great work that the organizations like the ones I'm lucky to sit up here with today have been doing, there's a surge in discussion right now about issues related to women and gender equality and women's rights. We actually recently just published some numbers on our blog at Twitter for International Women's Day, and the one that stuck out to me was that there's been a 300% increase in conversations about feminism on Twitter in the last 3 years alone. So there's definitely a seed change happening, and people are talking about these issues in a broad national way. In addition to talking about these issues publicly and together, women are also using Twitter to share their stories. As Anna said, there's these great moments of people sharing personal experiences with a community that they may not have otherwise had access to, on a platform that they may not have otherwise had the ability to reach. So, for example, with all of the stuff happening around the NFL in the last year, one of the things that for me personally was very moving was to see women tweeting their own experiences with domestic violence and abuse with the hashtag #WhyIStayed, and really having the opportunity to share their voice and to weigh in on that conversation, and to not just let the conversation be driven by whatever the media was reporting or the officials or the commissioners were saying. Additionally, I think that Twitter provides a place, like all other social media sites, for people to come together around big moments in pop culture. So, for example, when Beyonce performed in front of the word feminist, I believe it was the VMAs, there was a 64% increase in tweets using the word feminism. Which the power of the mighty Beyonce. But similarly, when UN Women had their He for She kickoff, there was a 115% increase in conversations about feminism. So, UN Women, Beyonce. And, on a more serious note, there were millions of tweets with the hashtag #BringBackOurGirls during the whole conflict in Nigeria, and the First Lady of the United States actually tweeted about it, and she got hundreds of thousands of mentions and retweets and favorites. So it really is a way to amplify these issues and put them at the forefront of the cultural zeitgeist. And I really personally believe that the more that we talk about these issues, the harder they are to ignore, the more they become part of the mainstream conversation, and the more things will change. In terms of actually driving that online to offline change, another big story that stands out for me personally, I actually went to UCSB. I don't know if there are any other gauchos in the room, but ole ole. And I lived in Isla Vista for the full 4 years that I went to UCSB, and so I was personally deeply saddened and outraged at the incident that happened there a couple years ago, the shooting incident, and to see the videos and the posts that the shooter put up online that were so misogynistic and reflected these deep-seated, really scary feelings about women. And then to see the response. Women took to Twitter and were tweeting with the hashtag #YesAllWomen to share their stories about the real, true detrimental effects that those kinds of attitudes have on their experiences, and to share their stories with sexual violence on campus. And as a result of this outcry, a number of college campuses actually went and reevaluated their codes of conduct, and started groups to talk about this, and really drove change offline. California, which is where I'm from, actually recently passed a law defining consent in a much stricter way, and a lot of pundits attributed that drive to get that law passed back to the conversation on social media, and again, the fact that it made the issue impossible to ignore. So for me, that's actually personally a very moving example of the way that talking about these things, and talking about them, and talking about them, and talking about them really does drive change beyond just the power of the conversation alone. So for those of you in the room that are looking to kind of get started on Twitter, or to figure out better ways to use Twitter to drive, the agendas that your organizations or groups are trying to really build, there's some great resources you may or may not be aware of. About.twitter.com has a ton of information to get started on Twitter. And actually media.twitter.com also has some really, really great case studies, tips and tricks, and success stories, and specifically has a ton of information about how to really use Twitter effectively for nonprofits and for government organizations. I'm also very happy and fortunate to be here. I'm a big fan of all these women that I'm sitting up here with. I feel very honored and lucky to be a part of this. And I'm very excited to answer any questions that you have, and to have a discussion about any ways that I can personally help to point you in the right direction in terms of using Twitter more for your organizations. And you can also follow up with me afterwards. My Twitter handle is just my name, @Molly. So thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Molly, for sharing really some powerful examples of successful Twitter campaigns, successful hashtag campaigns, but also for showcasing that through Twitter we had an overall tremendous increase of the conversation on gender equality. I think it's also important to have that in mind. It's not just a punctual campaign, it's actually the whole conversation. And that lasts longer, on several fronts, on several topics, parallel conversations, and also the opportunity to connect through Twitter, to follow influential organizations. So if you all would, all the tips you gave us also about how to use Twitter for promoting the work we're doing at different levels, I think is also very important to keep in mind. Thank you. Going to move now to Keshet Bahan, who is our fourth speaker. Keshet is an experienced gender equality activist and scholar. She's passionate about social media and spends much of her time harnessing internet platforms for advancing social change and feminism. She's an active blogger and also currently a girl expert with Plan International. I'm going to ask Keshet to share with us what she thinks and how she thinks social media can help increase women's visibility in decision-making processes and how it can influence the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Estelle. Thank you to all my panelists here. You're all fabulous. And to all my feminist sisters and brothers in the room and online. So I'm here to talk a little bit about online, offline activism, following on very well from Molly. And the Commission on the Status of Women has really always been a place where these two tracks meet to galvanize action and translate policy into practice. It's the 2 weeks of the year when the Twitter sphere is as full of gender discussions as the UN is full of feminists. As someone who has been an activist for over 10 years, essentially coming of age during the reign of the MDG framework, and in the shadow of the Beijing platform, which has taken on an almost mystic, legendary quality for people of my generation, I would like to take a moment to reflect on the ways in which I believe social media has changed the face of the women's movement. When I first attended the CSW in 2009, my biggest concern was finding an electric socket. The conference rooms, including the General Assembly Hall, were relics from a bygone era, and the most exciting event took place when I was forced to unplug a lamp in the hallway to charge my laptop, instantly plunging the entire area into complete darkness. So I'm sure you probably have still experienced that this week. For me, this experience really sums up the distance we have come in the way the UN views the importance of using technology to increase transparency, accountability, and participation. The MDGs were decided in a small room filled with UN technocrats. The Sustainable Development Goals, on the other hand, are the product of probably the widest consultation the United Nations has ever led. This could not have happened without social media platforms and forums for online discussion. The Beijing Platform Section J calls for the use of new forms of media to bridge gaps and ensure women's voices are included in decisions that affect their lives. We all know the challenges we face in making this a reality. The digital divide, which prevents women and girls from accessing, using, controlling, and designing tech tools. Discrimination in all its forms, which means women's engagement with technology, as we've heard, is often fraught with violence and abuse. Girls shying away from studying computers or science, leaving this sector to be driven by male-centered user experience. But we must also consider the ways in which social media has allowed young feminists and gender equality activists to make their voices heard, where once only the specialist was allowed to speak. I am part of a millennial generation that uses blogs to share our innermost thoughts, that relies on Facebook for breaking news, a generation that can say a lot in 120 characters, who views distances and borders as an insignificant detail. The exchange of views, the proliferation of opinions, and what I believe to be the consciousness-raising process that takes place anytime there is a feminist debate online is invaluable to the women's movement. Forums like the OECD's Wikigender have opened up a new space where vital gender and development issues can be widely discussed, and more importantly, where these discussions can impact influencers, including donors, the media, and multilateral institutions. In bridging online and offline activism, I have had the privilege of working directly with girls from all over the world. As an expert with Plan International, my work involves training girls to be advocates and use social media tools to engage with decision makers both locally and globally. Our focus on including girls in the post-2015 agenda has translated into real accomplishments in terms of policy outcomes, and it has, I believe, also fostered a new generation of girl advocates and empowered citizens. The goals on eliminating child marriage and FGM, on increasing educational achievements for girls with a focus on quality and safety, have all been hard fought for by many, including girls. We have used social media as a tool for extending the reach of girl-led campaigns through YouTube, where they uploaded videos and vlogs, through Facebook, where girls shared infographics, stories, and links, through Twitter, where their voices were heard by those in charge, through SMS messaging campaigns, online forums, and digital news magazines, through offline advocacy, ensuring girls meet and talk directly with their own governments at capital and at mission level, and most importantly, capturing these meetings through video, photos, and blogs, and using them to hold decision makers to account for the promises they make to girls behind closed doors. In 2014, one girl advocate who stood up for her right to an education was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Malala Yousafzai remains an inspiration to every girl in the world who has been denied her rights for her bravery in overcoming extreme violence to make her voice heard. I believe that social media is and will continue to be an instrument and a platform for women and girls who will not be silent in the face of discrimination and exclusion. My experience and those of my fellow panelists show that there is still a gap between online and offline activism, but it is narrowing rapidly. It is now up to us to keep the decision makers' doors wide open so women and girls from all across the globe can use social media platforms to enter into these spaces, influence the powers that be, and in so doing, become the next generation of feminists and activists. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Keshet. I think your point made very clearly that social media is the tool of the post-2015 agenda. I think we are really targeting here a young audience, which is also a younger generation that has the potential to really carry and advocate for gender equality efficiently using this tool and to directly influence the key people that we need to influence. I'm going to end this round of presentations with our last speaker, Sharon Bhagwan-Rolls, who is a Fiji Islander and a founder of coordinator of Femlink Pacific, which is a community media initiative that gives voice to the voiceless to empower women and ensure peace and security. I'm going to ask her how, through her work at Femlink Pacific, she managed to amplify the voices from the grassroots to the policy level. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me here today. I'd like to first start by acknowledging the women who had the foresight and the belief in the fact that media and ICTs are not only tools for our rights, our peace and security, but must also be designed and applied to be accountable to women regardless of age, ability and location. And I'd like to particularly mention the International Women's Tribune Center and the amazing work they did from the 70s into the new millennium, which we've really regarded as a mothership of Femlink Pacific, the organization I represent today. So what does our work mean? I just want to quote my colleague, Frances Tawake, who is here as her first CSW as part of our media team. And this is what she has to say in terms of our radio, but I think it also celebrates the legacy of Beijing. When I first joined FemTalk 89 FM and started doing interviews and producing radio programs, I realized that radio was more than just a device that has music and voices. Radio for me is a very important tool that can be used when advocating for issues concerning women and girls, as well as other vulnerable groups such as the LGBTQI community, persons with disabilities. I'm very happy when women use media as a tool to communicate their issues. Radio is an information tool. When women script and produce the programs, they don't just produce any random content. These issues are real to them. This is their life, unquote. Femlink's been producing content since 2001. We've picked up on 1325 and Section J to define the work we do. And we use a community media policy of starting and ending in the community. And over time, the content has shown the interconnection between all the critical areas of the Beijing Platform for Action, and of course now the whole post-2015 development agenda. This has included documentaries with rural women broadcast on our local television stations. We launched our first suitcase radio station in 2004, as well as publishing the community radio times and e-bulletins. We launched our website in 2007. We have a Facebook page, particularly one that we created for the young women producers and broadcasters of our organization.
We have a YouTube account, once again, something for young women to be able to create content for. And we also have a Radio with Pictures series. Publications include Policy for Peace and Here Are the Women. We've been tweeting for, I guess, almost a year. We now operate 2 community radio stations with podcasts, one in a rural community. And through our regional community media network, we provide media and advocacy training and provide appropriate and accessible technology to our team. Our media initiatives were developed to promote women's participation, promote women's rights, and to generate gender-inclusive content in Fiji and the Pacific, where we have one of the lowest numbers of women in local and national government. We were also promoting awareness of 1325, particularly in our regional network, where we've come together basically to work together to prevent the relapse of conflict. We're utilizing the media platform to support women of all diversities to generate their own content. And we're linking global campaigns with local initiatives and local media content that is giving women in our community media network an opportunity to really define what they feel are the development priorities, which we then from our hub communicate into policy spaces. We've developed our organization through different external audiences and partners in mind, but also primarily to give voice and visibility to the women, as well as demonstrate that media content should no longer just simply be the role of those sitting in newsrooms, as we have found in the Pacific, where while there are predominantly women in the newsrooms, there's still the patriarchy in decision making. All of this has enabled us to basically, or required us to engage with media and ICT policy. In Fiji, as a community media organization, we're registered under the Media Decree, promulgated by a military-led government in 2010, and despite the elections in 2014, there's been no reform or review of the decree. We have this policy at FemLink Pacific. It's called Keep Sharon Out of Jail, because then she won't be able to use a BlackBerry or tweet. We hold a broadcast license, which is renewed annually. This requires us to address IT and ICT policy. We have media interventions, and we've tracked the Pacific Digital Strategy. And we've actually found that in doing all of this, government officials who are determining these spaces, these platforms, have no idea that they're actually accountable to women's rights, even though they're working for governments who have ratified CEDAW or are progressing the Beijing Platform for Action. However, there has been some progress. We've been able to get media and ICTs on the regional gender equality agenda. If you look at the Beijing +20 report from the Pacific, you will see that we've actually contributed to the Section J report. There's a focus now on the need to build capacity of national women's machineries so they know how to generate content. Community media and feminist media networks have been reaffirmed. There's a recognition that we need to collectively transform ICT policies. Media monitoring tools such as the Global Media Monitoring Project have been reaffirmed as a way to also inform the policy processes. And we're really also looking at the access and affordability issue, particularly for women in rural and remote communities who are also burdened by the lack of the basics that they need: water, electricity, roads, transportation. If you don't have electricity, how are you going to get your story out, and how are you going to tweet? So what are the strategies in moving forward? There's a dearth of information right now in terms of cyberspace and social media. So whether you're following it or you're trying to contribute to content, we need to be better analyzing how to channel that. Yesterday, in terms of the cyclone in Vanuatu, I finally came across a tweet that talks about the 9-month pregnant woman who is overdue but has no access to water, food, and shelter from UNICEF New Zealand. We need to see all of this work in terms of convergence, not just limited to Section J. It's about communication rights as well as media rights and freedoms. It's about safe spaces online and in public media spaces. We need a combined approach. We need to take into account access and affordability, and we need to be working with broader social movements. And one of the things in terms of our Peace Network is looking at the opportunity with the Peace Portal of GPAC, the Global Partnership for the Prevention of Armed Conflict. So we can focus on the content and have partners who provide the platforms. But ultimately, for 20 years, no one's really been investing in the feminist media networks and to make sure that we can continue and sustainably produce content. Because at the end of the day, you can have all the platforms. I can walk into a radio station, I can walk into a television station, or I can pick up a BlackBerry or new phone, but if I don't have the content, what's the point? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sharon, for sharing the really inspiring work that you do and in bringing those voices at the national but also even regional level. I think it was really interesting. I'm going to, before giving the floor to discussion, just thank all the speakers. This was, I think, a real diversity of presentations. We've heard about collaborative platforms, but also how offline tandem, working in tandem with offline and online action is important. Social media, but also the media and amplifying voices, but also some of the challenges. We mentioned the digital gap, connectivity issues, capacity building, training, leadership issues, and promoting safe spaces online as among many others, I think. But I will end it here and give the opportunity for you to ask some questions, also via Twitter or just here in the room. We'll take 2 rounds of questions, and yes, and then we'll respond to you. So we have the first one over there on the left. Can you please introduce yourself as well?
Russo, I'm an editor of Peace, Earth and Justice News, and for Anna. Given that the Canadian government has initiated something called C51, which is really increasing the surveillance and giving more powers to the police and so forth, and right now is actually targeting Greenpeace for criticizing this bill, I want to know what sort of constraints you have in what you're doing in criticizing the Canadian government, which certainly needs criticism. So.
I'm from Linda McDonald from Canada. I'm working with an emerging issue, which is non-state torture, the non-state torture of women and girls in the family by parents or traffickers, pimps, husbands. I'm wondering if you can give me some ideas of how I can mobilize through Twitter and the social media to get the emerging issues out onto the main platform as large as possible. Thank you.
Okay, over here.
I spent last summer in a really rural part of Burundi where the women there didn't have access to internet or even mobile phones. So I was just wondering what your suggestion would be in how we can engage those women who don't have access to these technologies yet. Obviously build up to get them access, but in the meantime, what can we do to help get their ideas out there?
Yes.
I'm Marjorie Fields from New York City. I represent an international legal NGO. Without electricity on the grid, we have solar-charged radios, we have wind-up radios, so when the grid goes down, we can still get power. We can also have solar-charged light, and these devices also have capacity to charge mobile devices. You can plug in your mobile phone. They're not expensive, but certainly they're obviously less expensive than building the grid out to people who don't have access to the power lines. But solar, wind, other ways of connecting. And then I want to say I'm delighted to hear you mention radio. In other rooms, it was not mentioned at all, as though it had disappeared. Yet everywhere you go in the world, you walk down the street, through open windows, you hear BBC World Service.
I think I had a question in the back. Yes. One second.
Okay.
Excuse me, I had one person here who wanted to ask a question first.
Sorry, because I'm in the back. Thank you very much. My name is Aisha Hakamet. I'm a former gender affairs officer in UNAMID, Sudan. I'm a very staunch advocate of women's rights in Sudan, advocating for CEDAW and other international instruments. Our concern is on the media messaging, the basis of women empowerment, the notions and ideologies. There is a lot of emphasis on, in this conference on feminism. We advocate for women's rights based on international human rights instruments. Based on that, we advocate for women's rights in our countries and other Islamic countries. So if the women's rights are manifested as feminism doctrination, this will undermine our cause and goals in our Islamic countries, as feminism underlies a lot of ideological thoughts and beliefs, phrases, and wordings that haven't been globally agreed upon in the agreed conclusions of the Beijing Platform for Action and CSW till last year, 2013. So this is our concern. If we base human rights instruments as feminism, this will undermine our advocacy for women's rights. Thank you.
Just one last question, and then we'll get an opportunity for the speakers to answer them.
My name is Helen Sambili, a member of parliament from Kenya. I really appreciate the presentations that we've had this morning, and I'd like to say that Kenya has truly walked the talk of women empowerment. The more than 30% of our cabinet is made up of women. And actually, this afternoon, we will have our side event that is talking about empowering women and youth, where 30% of procurement positions are given to women, youth, and people with disability. So I welcome you to that meeting, which will be in the ECOSOC chamber. Secondly, I like to really say media is very useful in Kenya. In the last 7 years, there's been increase in FM radio stations and in local languages. And women in the villages, they are carrying radios everywhere. And they are so informed now of contemporary issues. And my challenge to you is, how can you translate these experiences of the rural women into the Twitter and Facebook and the other things, so that you can know what they are experiencing and what they have learned? How can you do that? And finally, I would like to really thank I like to say media is really useful. I attended a site event 2 days ago where the Guardian is helping fight FGM. And there was a girl from our country who has really been supported by the Guardian, and she is impacting her local community back home where that FGM is still practiced. And I want to thank you and say that really I am still a bit analog when it comes to Twitter and the other things, but I think it is useful what you are doing, the Guardian and the others. So thank you very much. I thought I should share that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the first question was for Anna.
Thank you. I think I'll address 3 of the questions. The first one here, which I'm not so familiar with the Canadian situation, but just to say that we got a grant from Canada and they have let us do whatever needed to do with Empower Women. So yes, there's no restrictions, even though I'm not familiar with the C-51 Act. Also in terms of Burundi and Kenya, how to bring the voices of women who don't have access to the internet, to cell phones, or even to the radio and to be communicating through radio. This is what we are trying to do with our members and particularly our champions, to go out in communities and grab those stories, grab those realities, write them up, and then either through videos, and actually the I Am Woman campaign is either through photo or through videos, and we allow our members to put them up there, to get the voices out, and really, and then, as I said, we are making the women the heroes of the day through Twitter, to be on Twitter with the realities and the voices that they have. So I think that's a way that we who are connected can go out in communities and help connect those who are not by amplifying their stories online.
There was a question on Twitter as well. Yeah.
So there's two questions I kind of wanted to speak to. The first, I'll kind of follow up with what Anna was saying about access. One thing that a lot of people aren't aware of is Twitter actually started as an SMS platform. And so, you know, although a woman may not have access to a smartphone or a computer, as long as there's access to SMS, which I know is still not universal, but is a little bit more universal than smartphones and computers are, as long as there's access to SMS, you can both send tweets and read tweets. And there's a lot of information on support.twitter.com about how to do that. And then in terms of how to get traction on Twitter for emerging issues, you know, and issues that that you're trying to draw attention to, there's a few tips and tricks that I have seen be very successful. So I think the first thing is really kind of, there's some common attributes that the most successful campaigns share. They're authentic. They really feel true to the voice of the organization. They don't feel too polished, too fussy, too staged. They feel real. They engage the audience on an emotional level, whether the emotion that they trigger is empathy or humor or outrage. There's some emotional punch to them. And that really, I think, helps to draw attention to them. They have a clear goal and a single goal that's easy to summarize and easy to share. So a great example is the I Am Woman campaign that's very simple, shareable. You can summarize it easily, and there's a lot of emotional punch to those stories. So I think those attributes really do help get your campaigns heard. Twitter is also kind of uniquely suited for situations where the public, global, real-time nature of the platform can really shine. So the things that do really well on Twitter are things like behind-the-scenes moments, giving access to events in a live, real-time way by posting videos and images, Q&As, those examples where people feel like they're part of a community that's coming together around a moment in that real-time public way. Those really do very well as well. And like I said, there's a ton of great case studies on media.twitter.com that specifically talk about raising awareness, raising funds, and using Twitter to push the agendas of nonprofits and government organizations as well as businesses. No problem.
And we have two more answers, so Keshet.
Yeah, I just wanted to say in raising awareness about issues of non-state actors and violence by non-state actors. I think that using crowd mapping, I don't know if you know that, has been incredibly successful all over the world in terms of changing policies and raising awareness. And this can be done anonymously. And if you know crisis mapping or Ushahidi or any of these platforms, they do great stuff. Harass Map in Egypt was really good. There's another one in India. And these are all ways of really showing the scale of the issue. And it's very impactful if you're working with police departments and so on. This has been done really all over the world, and it's been great, not just for violence. It's been done for showing, you know, a lot of different things. But it works very well for violence because it's anonymous. And one more word about radio. A lot of radio is actually being listened to on mobile phones these days. So we are seeing, I just wanted to make that link, and certainly in Kenya, where I spend a lot of time there in my project, and we're certainly seeing a convergence of different kinds of media, not so much the kind of traditional, you know, non-traditional media, but they're coming together very, very well, I think. So I just wanted to note that.
Yeah, Liz.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to comment on the couple of the points about sort of if you've got, how do you get sort of, I think the women in Burundi that you were speaking to. Obviously there are lots of NGOs that become sort of mediators who bring people over to London. There's often people coming into our office, good chance to talk to people. But also local journalists are so important, and we are desperately trying to get some good local journalists that can write for us. And I'm sure there's appetite out there, but and I think local journalists need to be supported. Journalists need to be supported particularly, and I know it's tricky, and there are restrictions, and that it's worrying signs that there is some clampdown from certain governments on journalists. But there are some fantastic voices out there, and I think that needs to be encouraged, because. And also, journalists love to travel. I know our lot back in Guardian. I mean, obviously, a chance to go to Burundi, yes. So there are, let us know if there are stories, what specifically is going on the ground, and if we can't get there, then maybe we can find somebody that can sort of more locally. And I think just to address your comment, I think this can be a real challenge, but sometimes the most heartwarming story is someone's personal story told very simply, without any big drama, without any kind of reference to feminism or rights or anything else. Just telling somebody's story can be powerful, and it doesn't need anything else. When I was studying years ago, a common thing that was said was, show, don't tell. And so many people want to really ram things the whole time down your throat in a nice feature. And it's like, no, just show me, and then I can see what you're trying to say. Don't have to tell me. And I think that could be a way around doing it, just very simple voices.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Liz. Another round of questions, and I think we will then end the event. So over there in the back. Yes, please. Introduce yourself. Sorry, your microphone, you cannot hear you.
Lumalas. I have just two contributions to give you a practical illustration about maybe make a suggestion. Okay, the first is the issue of media, okay? The Guardian is doing a great job, but you cannot work on your own when you want to try and reach everywhere. So basically, it would be a good idea if you can try and network with other leading media houses in regions where maybe you're doing your pilot projects. For example, in East Africa, we have a very big media house, maybe Royal Media. It's very, it has a wide coverage. So you need to find ways to partner with other media houses so you can get create more space for gender. Because I can give you an example. During political rallies, one time we're having a gender seminar. So we're just viewing a screenshot of what is happening at that rally. You can believe a male politician was speaking, and he was giving reference to his competitor, referring to him like, that one is just like a woman. He can be my wife. Things like that. It's very common, I'm from Kenya, by the way. So basically, you find that, and then you watch political rallies. Women are dancing very vigorously for men who are speaking. And this is what we are seeing in the media houses. So basically, you need to partner with the media houses in other countries. Otherwise, you cannot do it on your own. And then the next issue is Twitter. It's very well used right now. I can give you an example of what was happening at one point in our own country. There was incidents of stripping of girls, okay, and women in certain areas. Obviously, male aggression. And then what happens is we have Twitter groups. For example, we have one of women living in a certain area called Kilimani Moms. What they do, they have a Facebook account. So they agreed to go to the streets and lobby. So they had demonstrations and everything. What we are seeing is that currently, in my view, women movements have gone down, okay? That is my view. Maybe it's because you've gotten comfortable, you have more space, and then less activism. But then it's going maybe to social media. Maybe that's why this is important. So they came together, they organized rallies and demonstrations, and I think now everybody got their attention, the government, politicians, and they rectified the situation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. One more question, and then I think we're going to ask Diana to see if there are any questions via Twitter in a minute. So, yes, please.
I'm a government communicator from South Africa, and I wanted to share some of the things that we do in terms of linking social media, public broadcasting, and newspapers. Our politicians have signed with the president that they will do at least 10 public participation programs where they go out to communities, where they talk to communities and rural communities. Then we, as communicators, we then have our smartphones where we share what women are saying in the rural areas with those who are in the mainstream media, because as we know that newsrooms don't have the money to send journalists everywhere we want to send them. So we do and package ourselves and send them to them. But radio for us is very powerful. Wherever we go, we take our radio stations so that the women in the rural areas can also be part of the discourse. But even before our ministers go out to these communities, we have dialogues with them. So we can take their issues and also educate them. So the unique part of us is that they have as part of their KPAs, they sign with the president that they will go out and talk to communities and share their ideas. So the lady from Rwanda, maybe we can share ideas. But for the Twitter, from the lady from Twitter, I wanted to find out how then do you stop the hate speech and everything else that goes on online media across all platforms. I came in quite late when the lady from The Guardian was explaining how they do it, whether they have a dedicated person who removes those tweets. There's a big conversation going on in South Africa about that now.
Thank you. Diana, do we have any questions from Twitter? Just 2 would be good.
From Twitter, and they resonated with those from the audience. But one that didn't get an answer is basically how we translate the social media messages into policies. And a special question for Kashat: can online activism take the focus away from offline presence in the debate?
Thank you. So first I will ask the speakers to answer the 2 questions that were asked in the audience. I think there was one for Liz. Yeah?
Yeah, I just want to come back to the lady's question about trying to work with other media organisations. And I think The Guardian does try and do that, but sometimes it's easier just to try and work with a specific journalist or a few journalists rather than a media organisation, because then contracts come involved and it goes beyond. Whereas what we want to do is engage with a journalist who can go there, do their job, report back to us. And that's challenging because a lot of the journalists, we've got very good contacts with a particular newspaper in Uganda, and we've got the editor of this one particular paper is fantastic. He worked with us on the Katine project, and one of his younger staff who he's mentoring is writing for us quite a few times, which is brilliant. But he has a full-time job, so he can't always do everything. Fortunately, his boss knows this, so that helps. But we are really wanting to hear from journalists if they've got an idea for something, if they're going somewhere. It'd be great to get in touch. It's not always easy. Language can be an issue. Also, writing to, we don't want to sound big-headed or anything, but writing to a certain standard that The Guardian has, we have to kind of maintain that. And sometimes it needs a bit of work, a bit of back and forth, and a bit of patience with the copy that comes in. But if we find a good reporter that can go out, loves the subjects, passionate about talking to people and getting those stories out, then we want to hold on to them as much as we can. So if you know of any good journalists, then please get in touch with me. Or if you are a journalist, please get in touch with me. And just about the lady from South Africa about monitoring comments and that kind of stuff, we have a team of moderators, and we have somebody on our team that does sift through the comments. If we have a particularly problematic issue or a story coming out that involves a sensitive issue, then we will alert the moderators in advance, and they will definitely have it on their watch list to remove comments. So we try as much as we can, and obviously we try as much as we can to go into the comment threads to try and damp down a discussion as much as possible.
Molly?
So to answer the question about how we monitor and deal with hate speech and abuse and harassment, it is an issue that we take extremely seriously. It's actually an issue that folks on my team work on, and that is very personally important to me as well. We do have a clear set of guidelines and rules for what isn't acceptable to post on the platform. And when we get reports of people posting things that violate those guidelines, we do have an operations team that processes those reports and deals with them and takes action according to our standards. It's definitely something that a lot of people across operations, legal, public policy, engineering, product design are working on improving at Twitter. And you may have seen a couple weeks ago, we announced some improvements on our operational side to enable us to process more of those reports more quickly and respond more quickly. We've also recently released some changes to make it easier to report instances of hate speech, abuse, harassment, and those sorts of things on Twitter and through our support.twitter.com center. So it's definitely something that we take very seriously and that we are actively working to improve.
And there was one question for Keshet from Twitter.
Yes, thank you to my Twitterati. I think it's a really good question. Does online activism take away from offline activism? Probably not, but what you're referring to is what we call slacktivism, which is, I did what I need to do because I liked a photo on Facebook, I'm done. That's all I need to do today to feel good about myself. There is that, but I think that research has shown that you still get the same number of people who would come to a march. Regardless, that hasn't changed. The people that are actually going to come out and walk down the street, it hasn't changed in terms of social media. You're just getting a lot more voices out there and probably a lot more impact. And one final note before we finish. I wrote a report with Linda Raftery, and I tweeted it just now. Thank you. It's a report on empowering girls through ICTs, and it's chock full of case studies from all over the world. So if you want to use technology to empower girls and women, please check out the report. Yep.
Anna, did you want to add anything? Oh, no. I would just to say on the other Twitter question on how to translate social media messages into policies. It is not something that's easy to do, of course. I think with Wikigender, one thing that we're doing is, that I mentioned at the beginning, is through the online discussions, we try and gather women's stories, women's perspectives from the ground who are being able to be connected, of course, but then we try, like in the form of briefing papers like this, to translate it into recommendations. So I think at one level, we are somehow trying to influence the policy-making sphere, but it is a long-term process, and I think we have this event showed that we have this very how to keep the momentum of the social media Twitter campaign. Is it something, hashtag activism, is it just to raise awareness? We have to be clear on what we're trying to achieve. Do we raise awareness? Do we mobilize for something that's more long-term? Do we try and change a policy? I mean, I think this is also something that we have to keep in mind when we use social media. Have a clear strategy to achieve what we want to do. Right, so I'm thinking we're going to end it here because we've been running over time. I will take some questions from you on Twitter after the event, and also please come and speak to us if you would have more questions. But I'd like to end here with Anna will provide some concluding remarks for this event. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before doing so, I just wanted to respond to that question from South Africa on how you, I think it was South Africa, how you translate social media messages to policy change. And the example that I gave before with the Iraq asking for guidance on how to do gender responsive procurement, what was very interesting in that whole process where we featured Kenya as one of the good practices was that by tweeting out this query out in the world, we got a response from the American Bar Association who helped us also to collect all of the good practices from around the world through their pro bono work. But also they volunteered to help us draft the legislation in Iraq. So thanks to social media and Twitter, we actually made that change happen. And what we do on our platform is that we take the knowledge that you all share with us on empowerwomen.org, and we package it, and we are preparing different knowledge products that then go out to policymakers. So don't see a tweet as just those 140 characters. There's often linked to a publication or to some other kind of knowledge that is connected to it. But just very briefly, to wrap up this session, I would like to thank all of you and you online and on Twitter for being here today. We've heard a lot of different means of communicating, from traditional media to new media, and also how we connected to the radio with the online environment, and how you can listen to radio today on your cell phone. At the beginning, Molly was asking how many people are on Twitter. I think it was a very high percentage, maybe 75%. So I want to know now, is everybody committed to get online and to get on social media? Great. So those who don't have accounts, we expect to see you online. And we've talked about different platforms. You have the wikigender.org, empowerwomen.org on the screen. But we also heard from Twitter about their content platform, about.twitter.com, media.twitter.com. We heard from The Guardian. It's a little longer URL, but it's www.theguardian.com/global-development/women's rights. But I'm sure if you Google it, then you'll find it anyway. You Google Liz Ford on women's rights and you'll find the space. And we also heard from the blogger kashetbashan.com. It's basically her name in one go.com. You can all connect with us there. And we also learned some new terms, I think, about internet trolls, online trolls, and we heard positive messages and negative messages. But we know for sure that women are better connected today than 20 years ago. And we heard that the more women we are online, the more we can defend those and go against those online trolls. And together, we can beat those online trolls and bullies online. We also heard about we need more investment in women's content. Fully agree. But each of us can be an advocate from bringing that content online. It doesn't cost much to go and tell the story of your neighbor, the story of somebody in your workplace, or help them bring their voice together, help them write it up. And we do that through the I'm Woman campaign. We are, even if English is not your first language, we help you to craft that language for you so you get those voices out. And talk. I think was that Molly, that by talking and talking and talking, we create change. And don't remember, all voices count. Thank you so much. And we'll be outside with the frame if you want to join us and be part of our campaign. Thank you.